Good afternoon, live from Toronto and the GBKM network. This is the Chat Up Show, the show where we catch you up with a chat up of our weekly headlines. I'm your host, Elizabeth Aloidi, and I hope that you are ready to chat it up with me today. Now, as always, you know you can keep up with the GBKM network in various ways. You can listen and watch live 24/7 at www.gbkm.tv or www.gbkm.fm, where you can catch up on any past shows you may have missed, check out our upcoming show schedule for the week, check out our breaking news tab for global news that's going on, and like, share, comment, interact, all of that good stuff. You can also download our free app that's available for all iOS and Android devices today. And yes, it is free, so don't worry about that. You can download the GBKM app right now. You get the same features as our web station, but with the app, you are notified every time we go live. You'll receive a notification so you won't miss another show again. So if you're someone who's like, oh, I love GBKM shows, but I can never keep up with the schedule, do not worry, this app is for you. Just turn on those notifications and you'll be alerted every time we go live. You can also continue to catch up with us on Facebook and YouTube at GBKM Network, where you can also watch and listen live. You can leave comments, like, share, comment, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at GBKM Network, where you can stay updated on what's going on at the GBKM Network. Now, some of you have been asking for a COVID update of what's going on for us right here in Ontario, and you know I'm your girl. I'm always going to come with the information to make sure we're all safe and well equipped for this pandemic that seems to be going on and on. But good news right now, Ontario has reported 325 new cases of COVID as of Monday morning. Now, just to give you an idea of the rise, it's not such good news actually. Ontario saw 168 additional infections last Monday and 119 on the Monday before that. And now this Monday, it's 325. So there has been a steady increase in the number of daily cases that we're seeing. The 7-day average of daily cases increased for 4 straight days, so the past 4 days as of the beginning of this week, up to a level that we haven't seen since at least late June. So there is, an increase in the daily cases, and currently the province's test positivity rate is 2.3%, which is the highest it has been since mid-June. Also, as of this week, the land border between Canada and the United States was opened to permanent residents and citizens of the U.S. who are fully vaccinated and test negative for COVID-19 within 3 days of crossing the border. Now, the same is on the other side as well for permanent residents of Canada and Canadian citizens who are going to the U.S. They need to be fully vaccinated, double dosing, not just one, both doses of the vaccine, and make sure that you test negative of COVID-19 virus at least 3 days within you crossing the border. Now, as of today, according to the COVID-19tracker.ca, 82.05% of adults 18 years and older have received at least one dose of the vaccine, and 73.45% are fully vaccinated. Now, according to our Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kieran Moore, 81% of Ontarians aged 12 and older have also received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. He also acknowledged the province's quote unquote slow and steady rise, end quote, and that we should continue to expect to see an increase as we enter the fall-autumn season as well, but that there's no reason to panic, that this is just part of the cycle, that we can expect to see these rises just based on the changes in the seasons and based on the fact that, a lot more people are interacting outside of their household, we're socializing and gathering indoors more. But to ensure that we're staying safe and healthy, we need to adhere to our protocols from before. So all mask protocols and social distancing protocols are still a must, especially in areas that, aren't required and you're next to someone and maybe you can't social distance as much. You're going to keep your mask on for longer periods of time. Of course, when you're eating and drinking, you're not going to have a mask on and you're probably not going to be as distanced at a table, but in all your other activities, as much as you can, just continue to stay safe. We're not completely out of the clear yet, but it's not something to panic about. So right now, our Chief A medical officer of health is saying, Dr. Kieran is saying that we shouldn't panic, but that we should continue doing what we're doing to stay safe. Of course, we know that our most vulnerable communities have been protected. We're looking at those who are over the age of 65, aka, I don't want to call them senior citizens, that feels a little disrespectful, but our vulnerable population, folks who are living in long-term care homes. There are even some care homes that are opening up to tours. So we know that that population is a lot more protected, which is why the government feels more comfortable allowing for these restrictions to be eased. And we're also about 2% away from our fully vaccinated goal for September, being at 73.45%. We're supposed to reach 75% by September. So we're looking like we're going to be ahead of that goal by the time September rolls around. So it is good news, even though it may seem like it's blanketed by a little sad news. Seeing the cases rise is not something that we look forward to, but we know right now that we should not panic and we shouldn't expect increases in number of daily cases as we go into the colder months. So there is your quick update. Of course, if you are looking to get vaccinated on your second or first dose, you can go book online at www.covid-19.ontario.ca/book vaccine, where you can go either through phone or through a pharmacy or online options to book your vaccine. And so there we have it. Now on today's topic, I'm sure if I asked you right now to name at least one hip hop artist, rapper, you can do it, even five. I'm sure you can name five different artists. No matter where you are across the globe, you have come in contact with what is considered the hip hop genre of music. And though it is said to have originated, facts show that it's originated in North America, the United States specifically, it has now become such a popular genre of music that folks are even considering that it is part of pop culture, maybe considered pop music nowadays, because when you turn on the radio, you're bound to hear a hip hop artist. Now, we have someone who essentially fits into the body of globalized hip hop, if you will, joining us today as our very special guest. So please join me in welcoming to the Chat Up Show, Kamau Meets the World. Hi, Kamau. How you doing?
Hey, Elizabeth. Thank you for having me on. I'm doing very well.
Of course.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Now, you're joining us all the way from Geneva, Switzerland. So how are you guys doing over there in terms of the pandemic? How are things going?
That's right. I just listened in to your breakdown of what the situation in Ontario is like, and it seems quite similar, actually. The vaccination rate seems to be on course for the targets that they had set, and we're opening up borders and reducing quarantine restrictions with neighboring countries and trying to get industries started again. So, we're optimistic about things moving in a positive direction, but we have been foiled before in that respect.
Yeah.
So I think we are, on the one hand, some of us are a bit overly cautious perhaps, and some people are perhaps overly keen to be out there again. Well, I think that the routine that I developed during the pandemic has essentially just carried over into the lifting of the restrictions. So I pretty much do the same things, which are relatively enclosed. So I'm in the cautious group, but not necessarily for that reason, just out of habit.
Yeah, it's just your comfort zone. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
So Kamau, as an artist, I don't want to call it an origin story like you're a villain or something, but
I'll embrace that. I'll embrace that.
yeah, sure. What's your origin story? Like, how did your journey with music begin and flourish to now you are Kamau Meets the World?
Well, I think that obviously it's not something which necessarily had a master plan behind it, that you set out just ticking all of the boxes. It's just kind of something that grows and evolves as you grow and evolve alongside it. But I think, maybe you remember from high school, I've always had a penchant. At some point, I started trying to produce it myself, and it aligned with these creative interests I have. So it sort of just became the medium through which I'm trying to express myself as a writer. I think that that's sort of a synopsis of that.
Yeah. And especially with hip hop, because a lot of people say that hip hop is just modern day poetry with a nice beat.
Yeah.
And just mentioning, for those who don't know, Kamau and I went to high school together in Geneva, and we
Yes, I
graduated
realized I
together.
dropped that without
Yeah. I
yeah.
wasn't sure if we were doing that, but yeah, no, we've known each other since high school, and knowing you as well, having done musical together and been in the dramatic theatrical arts, just then going into the writing of it all, like how how did you feel comfortable enough when it came to like writing lyrics and going into that? Because for some people, it's like, oh, I don't think that my words matter, or I don't think they make sense. So they shy away from actually leaning into their creative outlets, which could be writing songs, or they shy away from their talents and their goals and passions.
I think that for me, in some respects, it was kind of fortunate because maybe what I discovered with sort of writing was the sort of the freedom to actually write things first and foremost for myself. And so that meant that the things that I was maybe not at first comfortable sharing with other people, I was able to express in that medium, you know, because at first I wasn't trying to share it with anyone else. That being said, building up the confidence to then share that with people, I think is also a consequence of the fact that before I was writing, I was freestyling, which I think is a really an inherent part of hip hop, maybe less so today. But I think sort of making up words and lines as you go along and just making art in the spur of the moment, sort of like an improv game in theater or something, where the script hasn't been written and you just kind of follow the momentum of the song as it leads you to go along, is at first what I fell in love with. So, you know, just like being with other aspiring MCs and artists and just kind of being the most creative you could possibly be in the spur of the moment is what I started with. And then when I realized there were certain things that maybe I didn't feel comfortable saying in those environments, or I felt like there were certain words that were going to waste because they were never being recorded, that's when I started writing things down for myself first and foremost, and having that freedom to express things that, you know, might be banal or whatever they might be, but having that total sense of freedom to express genuinely how I felt and feeling blocked back.
Yeah. Oh, having some technical difficulties there.
Relatively simple.
Oh.
Getting that then out to the public is a lot of that.
Yeah. And you hear it a lot from a lot of songwriters, especially, that it's like they'll have a book or something where there's so much content that no one ever gets to see.
Yeah.
But it's so important to the journey and like you growing as an artist. Like, is it almost like a journal where you can look back and be like, wow,
For sure, for sure. I mean, I think even just looking back at earlier releases, especially when you sort of, you know, pour your heart into it, as it were.
oh, we just having some technical difficulties there. We just lost Kamau for a second. But for those of you who are just joining us, this is the Chat Up Show. I'm your host, Elizabeth Lloyd, and we're joined by Kamau Meets the World in Geneva, Switzerland. Okay, we have you back there.
Nice. I think I disappeared.
Yeah. But you were saying how, you know, like past work that you get to look back at is, you know, seeing where you were in that moment, seeing the growth. It's kind of cool to have that opportunity. But do you ever cringe, like you look back or you listen back to something and you're like, why would I ever say this in public out loud for other people to hear?
Yeah. Well, I think there is an element that maybe start with friends and family and just the people in your immediate circle, and you share that with them and it resonates because they might be going through similar experiences, or they discover a layer or facet of you that they didn't know beforehand, you know, and then you realize that actually maybe maybe in a way that you hadn't expected, the vulnerability of your kind of naked thoughts is actually what strikes a chord most strongly with an audience, you know, and that can be empowering. if you can bring yourself to then share it.
That's that is the key, right? It's like being
Yeah.
confident enough to share those vulnerable, because not everybody, like people love to criticize artists and be
Mm.
like, oh, like the flows, the lyrics not working, whatever. But then to actually get up there and bear such intimate, vulnerable parts of your soul, your being, who you are, isn't always the easiest. So what keeps you like motivated and like focused, that it doesn't matter what the outside noise is as long as I'm creating art that makes me feel good?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I say it like all I'm doing is kind of pouring my feelings out onto songs. But like the reality is that it's also just a lot of fun to do.
Yeah.
It's like it's just a fun hobby. I really like writing verses, making words rhyme, saying clever things, and trying to better myself and outdo what I've done in the past and just keep going with that. And I think the more of that I do, the more results from it I start to see. Face it in different contexts.
Yeah.
Well, that's quite encouraging. So it spurs you on.
Yeah. And that's like validation, right?
Yeah, exactly. It feeds itself.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I don't know you as Kamal, but where
Sure.
what is the origin of Kamal?
Yeah, so Kamau is actually my middle name. Um,
Oh,
and
okay.
it was kind of a dormant towards manhood and responsibility, and you would have trials and rituals that would accompany you through that phase, and then you could be sort of reborn, quote unquote, as a man or whatever stage you had arrived at, and
Yeah.
maybe you would shed a name or act, and as these kind of rites of passage dissipated, right? And yeah, and then so it just got passed down. I mean, it's my grandfather. And I guess it was just an opportunity when I was trying to represent myself to the world and create a persona which would feel authentic to me, but distant enough that I could present myself with enough freedom. I thought, well, what better way to tap into this? Because I have it, it's a nice name, I like the sound of it, and it's not something I ever use, so I might as well. And on top of that, it allows me to sort of put my African roots forward.
Interesting that you bring up the fact that you wanted to have this, like, the African roots connected and coming forward, especially in hip hop, which,
Mhm.
a lot of people feel that it's for black people and black people should be the gatekeepers of the genre. And since it's originated from the struggle that a lot of black people, most predominantly black Americans, face, that folks, the culture, so to speak, don't really have a right to partake and especially profit off of it. How do you feel? How do you feel about that thought?
Um, I think that whilst there is some merit to that, I think that it's definitely a very nuanced conversation, and I mean I think it feeds into a broader conversation about appropriation. And I can respect other people holding different beliefs. I sort of have to believe that there is something that it's okay, you know,
Yeah.
to pay homage to a culture by borrowing from it, because that's essentially what I'm doing, you know. Although I'm a person of color, you know, I also do have a white father. I'm not an African American, you know,
Yeah.
so um, offshoots, you know, I listen to a lot of French artists or British rappers, or now, you know, continental African artists, and you know, there's such a big mix of it.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think there is something to be said for the fact that there can be a more sinister happens within the context of America itself, you know. I mean, although the music is being created by and large by a certain community, that's not necessarily the same community who reap the rewards, because they hold the rights and ownership of record labels and
Yeah.
distribution services and the infrastructure that props this up, you know. Nor is it necessarily targeted primarily at that same group of people, but now to a more middle class audience and maybe more predominantly white audience. And so obviously there are nuances that I can appreciate. I think the main thing though is that it's a beautiful thing for it to become popular, for it to be so infectious that other people want to do their own variations of it. But I think that the homage should always be there, and it should always be by empowering the community who initially kind of gifted the world with that, right?
Yeah, like you can't talk smack about the community that gave you hip hop while you're writing a
Yeah.
beat that was created by the yeah.
Crazy, you know. It's like that's where it becomes a little bit laughable, you know. It's like if you really are tapped in, and you sort of don't detach the product from the context in which it was made, and sort of maintain an appreciation for the culture and the people who brought that to you, then I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you then on the other hand separate the two,
Yeah.
you know, and you glorify a genre or the offshoot of a culture while without embracing the people who brought that to you, there's like a certain dissonance there.
Just music. Like, why do people care so much about who
Yeah.
is involved in a genre of music, who's making the money off of certain artists' backs in this certain genre? Like, it's just music. Why is it so deep?
Well, I mean, I would say that, you know, art is frequently an opportunity for society to look back on and criticize. Yeah, I mean,
That is the question.
power, I think. Yeah,
Now, I want to talk about your latest EP or your first EP,
yeah,
Friends and Foes. That
that's
title,
right.
first of all, I was like, yes, okay. Are we gonna hate on certain people in this project? What is going on? You're gonna celebrate your friends. You're gonna call out your foes. So what was the feelings behind this particular EP?
Well, I think, I mean, it was tapping into a universal idea to
Yeah.
begin with. It's a three-song project, and I mean, the three songs on it are called Funk, which I'm going to perform a bit later, which is really a celebration of my friends. And the second is called Imposter, and the third is Ghosting. And imposter is something which refers to the imposter syndrome. You know, it's this sense of belonging or not, which is something that I'm very, I guess for lack of a better word, inspired by in my art, because it's a question I ask myself a lot, you know. And I think ghosting is about sort of the isolation that can come from this sense of paranoia about the people around you. But yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of learning the nuances of the relationships you have, and especially it's felt like a potent thing to do for me, because on the one hand, I wanted to celebrate sort of my friends and the relationships and the bonds that have helped me to get as far as I am as a person or in my career, you know. But at the same time, now that I'm moving into a space where, for instance, music is more of a career, the context is a bit dangerous, because a lot of people shake your hand and smile very vigorously at you and entice you with lots of beautiful words. But that's not to say that they actually are invested in your future. They're opportunists, perhaps, you know. So learning to be a bit more wary of the landscape around you and to try and get a sense of that And also, you know, not to be so quick to point the fingers without reflecting on whether you're besides the things that are being said about you.
So
Yeah.
deep. I love it. I listened to Ghosting and I was
Okay.
like, okay. Like I felt like I was getting called out a little bit there. I was like, okay, okay. I mean, there are some days that I just do not talk to anybody. There are
Yeah.
some days that maybe I do ghost a little. There are some days where you
Yeah.
feel like a little like, I'm gonna give you the side eye because like I don't know what
Mm,
how you're moving around me. It's a little fishy.
mm,
But then going back to imposter and speaking of imposter syndrome, I think that's something, especially in our generation, that comes up a lot in conversation. That we all feel that we don't belong. We all feel that we're not like worthy of,
mm-hmm.
the success for some reason. Like it's like a universal feeling that, when I speak to older generations, they're like, yeah, I kind of felt that way. But then like things always work out. And I'm like, yeah, but we
Yeah.
all feel like everything is hopeless. Like, why do we all feel this way?
Mm. Well, I mean, I guess I would volunteer that the general kind of inflation about think it does accentuate the fact that competition is pretty intense. You know, there's a lot of people who are talented around, and to be constantly bombarded by the achievements of everyone else, it's this sense of wow, like, and you know, to be in this narrative of hustle culture where it's like work, work.
Stay on your grind no matter what. Like you always have to be working 24/7.
Yeah, exactly.
But how do you
For
how do you
sure, for
manage
sure.
that?
Um, I don't. No, I
I
think.
caught you there, didn't I?
No, I think that's something that I'm learning. I think something that hit me recently actually about that is that, you know, because especially when you're, I mean, essentially what I am as a striving, aspiring artist is kind of like an entrepreneur, you know, it's like investing a lot into a business and hoping it'll work and evolve and grow. And so you feel like every moment that you're not using because you're in charge of your own time is potentially an opportunity that you're wasting, you know? And so learning to like really considerately set breaks for yourself is important, as well as like actually taking those breaks to switch off. I mean, I think I clocked onto the notion that if my mind is continuously active and continually worrying about these small things or these larger issues even in my life, even when I'm not invested in that specific activity, well, that's going to contribute to burnout. I am kind of tiring myself out with my own mental dialogue, you know. So I'm working on it.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, take it. I mean, just like embracing taking time to just enjoy what you're doing in that moment, even if it doesn't contribute to the master plan of your career or something, you
Oh,
know.
but that's so hard to do.
Yeah, I know, I know. But you know, if it was easy, what would we have left to accomplish, you know?
That is true. That is true. On that note, we are going to take a really quick break, but make sure that you stay tuned to come back because later on in the show, we will be having a live performance from Kamau himself. So stay tuned.
Do you want to be your own boss and make income or extra income with flexible schedule? Welcome to Keenan Courier. Keenan Courier works as a marketplace platform connecting customers who need something delivered with drivers that are willing to serve them. Courier with any vehicle, better trip allocation, and cash out your earnings whenever you want. Download our driver apps today to sign up.
Hello and welcome back to the Chat Up Show. I'm your host Elizabeth Oloidi, and today we are joined by a rapper, an artiste, straight from Geneva, Switzerland, Kamau Meets World, or Kamau, as I've been affectionately calling you all day today. So before we went on the break, we were kind of talking about, dealing with imposter syndrome, this culture of hyper surveillance. It feels like we're always in tune with each other, we're always connected in some way, but the importance of taking a break to kind of disconnect so our minds aren't racing. And I think in this pandemic especially, For a lot of us, it's been hard to balance, you know, real life and what's on social media because real life is so different from what we've known and been accustomed to, and it's changed, and we're all kind of stuck indoors with our thoughts that can drive us insane. How have you been able to channel this pandemic energy into your creative outlets? Because there are multiple of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it felt kind of apocalyptic. And so I think like that sort of interrupted all my long-term plans. You know, I was used to having a sense of security about where I was going to be in 6 months, but everything was suddenly up in the air, you know, and there was no telling when we might return to normal or whatever else the case might be. And so I kind of had no choice but to just put my head down and be, well, okay, what's in front of me right now? What can I do right here, right now, you know? So I think that's probably the biggest shift is I just started making music without, and, you know, venturing into other creative pursuits within like the limits of my own confinement that it afforded me, you know. But I just started venturing into these things with no goal beyond simply just keeping myself active, you know. It just, I guess it made me more prolific as a sort of survival mechanism.
Yeah. Survival mechanism or survival guide. You have your podcast, The Unqualified Guide to the Good Life.
Yeah.
And so this is a podcast that you co-host with your friend Adam.
Right, Adam, yeah.
Yeah, and so this, I love listening to it because you guys get into specific topics, but you go so in depth with it that I'm like, how can you go deeper? But what was it about that outlet that felt, what was it freeing for you to be able to just have these conversations that were open and honest with a friend? And what was it about that felt so freeing?
Well, it's something that we started in the pandemic. I think one of the reasons why we started it, and one of the reasons actually why we also built a small community, you know, I was making a podcast remotely with one of my best friends who was living a few borders away, you know, and I just missed hanging out with him, and we used to have cool conversations. So we started creating, I think, a purpose and a reason to having conversation, you know, and then we started creating themes and exploring because we just like talking. We could spend the evening talking. So we just created a bit of a framework around that, you know, and then even other friends of ours came on and as guests and tried to kind of recreate the environment we have as a social group, but just online, you know. And I think, again, this sense of capturing moments that felt like they were valuable, at least to us, for posterity, you know, like to be able to look back and say like, okay, as 23-year-olds or whatever, these were the things that we were interested in, and these are the beliefs we had on the world, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so other side of it as well, you are also part of a duo, Kamau and the Wolf. Because I think I met the Wolf one time in high school sometime.
He's a producer. He's been my friend, one of my best friends, for much longer than we've made music for. But he was actually first in music. His father is a musician, and he kind of grew up in that context. And so he actually, I mean, it's kind of, this is my origin story. I should have started with this, but he gave me a USB card, USB key with, I think, nearly 4,000 hip hop songs on it when I didn't really know what hip hop was as like an 11, 12-year-old. And he was like, go listen to all of this.
Yes, the LimeWire.
Basically, that sort of changed my life, obviously. And so it kind of felt quite appropriate that when I then first started releasing things, before this first capsule, that he produced everything I released, and that he would occasionally rap with me or sing, lend his voice to choruses. And yeah, I think we just have this sort of comfortable rapport of being very good friends who have then just made music for fun, and then eventually taking that to a place where, okay, well, let's now try and stylize this a little bit and package it up that it's presentable for a public, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Now we're going to take a little gear shift back into the conversation of hip hop and its impact globally. A lot of people look to artists and say, like, you're role models, what you rap about, these. Watch yourself, especially with female artists. I'm not going to make it a gender thing or like a sex thing, but you know, a lot of the time it's this criticism from parents, especially, who are like, I don't want my kids listening to your music, change the lyrics, don't rap about certain things. Like, as an artist, do you see yourself as a role model for the next generation, or do you just see yourself as a person that's just expressing what's inside them?
I think probably the latter. And I think ironically, those two things can be the same thing though. You know, if you teach people to be honest and vulnerable and reflective, then maybe those are good values to embody and to pass on, even though you're showing your failings as an individual and your limitations, you know. And to people, I think, who place the burden of role model and responsibility on artists, I think there is a certain merit to that. And maybe there is more that artists can. So maybe it'll be an issue. Parents are quick to hide the more sinister aspects of the world from their children because they want to protect them, rather than equip them with the tools to deal with these things. You know, rather than saying that artists should behave in a certain way, why don't we teach children to be more critical of the media that they take in? You know, why don't we teach them to look at artists critically, like give an education to children that shows them that you don't have to embrace everything that person on the screen is saying. Feel free to judge them. They're human. They make mistakes as well. And maybe they promote some things that don't, you know, align with your own values. That's cool. You know, that's cool too. Go run with that. So I think there is a balance. Maybe there is a responsibility with artists, but I think we can do more as an audience rather than just, you know, take the responsibility away from kids and say, oh yeah, we're spoon feeding them anyways. They don't think for themselves. No, let them think for themselves. Teach them to think for themselves.
Yeah.
You know?
Critical thinking, that is something that always keeps popping up.
Yeah. Yeah.
But even like last year when we were seeing the rise of protests across the globe for Black Lives Matter, there are a lot of artists that came out, especially hip hop artists. Either their performances were centered around that conversation, or, you know, they would put out music that was around that whole movement that was really reawakening in this generation. But folks felt that when it starts becoming part of the performance, that it could be too performative and it's not as genuine. How do you see that argument?
I mean, yeah, I agree with that to a degree. I think you can, the thing is, it's quite intuitive, I think. When you see someone, it's virtue signaling, right? You know, you notice that on social media, you know, some people are very, very vocal in their online presence about certain issues, but they actually probably care more about being seen to represent these issues for the sake of their own reputation rather than actually what happens to those issues. It's the exact same thing for artists. You know, there are some people who are really out there who really care, and they're telling those stories and empowering and doing the work and researching and reading and becoming informed and aligning themselves with struggles. And there are people who just think it'll be good for their brands, you know, but you can usually tell the difference.
Yeah, it's a gut feeling, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, you know, things are opening up, so you're allowed to perform a little bit more. What has been the best part of being able to do live performances again in front of a crowd and not in front of a screen?
Oh, wow. So much. I mean, it's pretty much the best part, I think, about this, you know, like not only is it the sort of bread and butter in the sense that that's what is the financial key to sort of being a successful artist, I think is the money is really in shows. So I think that's, as a livelihood, that's really important. But also just to actually have people respond to your music in real time is not the same as having them stream it through their telephone, you know. For you to create like an experience in the moment with someone and to kind of create this kinship because of, I mean, you know, music that you're performing but that they're enjoying and bringing their own energy to, that energy is just hard to recreate in another context.
Yeah, well, we're going to get that energy now because we're going to watch you perform your song Funk We're about to
Yeah.
get funky today in the studio. So here, or do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the song is funk. It's off the EP that we mentioned earlier called Friends and Foes. So it's my first official release under my own name, Kamal Meets World, although I have released other things in collaboration with other artists. And it's the lead single of the capsule called Funk. And this is really, I think it's just something that I wanted to be able to make that I could play at a barbecue with my friends, and that, you know, I could shout us all out, and we could have a good time with it. You know, we could capture the atmosphere of what it's like to be back out enjoying the sun. Okay, hello. My name is Kamal Meets World, or Kamal for short. This is a song called Funk that I just released in July off my first EP, Friends and Foes. It's produced by Graham, and I'm gonna perform it live for you now in my studio. That's the Los Ceilings. It go. Hey, I had to switch it up a bit. If I'm in the studio, I'm only cooking hits. I can't talk with people who only be talkish. Another poke of only having me to represent. Actually, that's a like on my brothers up on a scent. We've been pushing flavor, we're pumping it through the vents. Yeah, I like to smile, but still I got ill intent. All about investment, I'll triple up what I spent. Cause I got a mama who tryna be proud of me. She just wants me happy and standing on my 2 feet. That's the most important thing to tell you honestly. But if I'm oversleeping, she'll never see the dream. Me and my brothers jet important, you know the team. Only sit with artists who also be trying to scheme. Zach in the studio spicing up the cuisine. Sybil pull the knife out the sharpest out on the scene. Evil making movies like it's Hollywood. They're looking at us like we're crazy. I be looking back like F you pay me. I'm out here, I got you looking lazy. Less I'm in the studio with Mike. He can write a masterpiece in 20. Music, I'm not tripping if it doesn't blow. Me and Esco will just find another road. We've been trying to plot it since like 2008. Or was it 96? I can't get the story straight. The point is if you wanted to stop it, you're kinda late. Us going places was never up for debate. If it wasn't for a lockdown, I'd be tearing up the stage. I was mad at the world, started channeling the rage. Got my karma and my dharma, that's my history and my fate. Still a brand new day, need a brand new page. Woo, can you feel it? Man, Graham killed the beat, tell him heal it. I know you mess with me on this one, I just wheel it. I got a master plan, let me reveal it. A good life, I plan to live it, even if I play the villain. I know Adam sees the vision, do you feel it? I can make my own decisions, man, I trust my intuition. Need a much higher position at the ceiling. I said, hey, we all want something. I came in with a bunch of fucking homies, and you know you can't touch the team. Hey, no discussing. Wouldn't call that shit a victory if everybody doesn't get to eat. Whatever it takes, what it's costing. I took a little second, but I'm back right up where I'm supposed to be. And I said, wait, cause I'm not bluffing. I look out for my people trying to make it, and I know they're looking out for me. And again it go, hey, we all want something. I came in with a bunch of fucking homies, and you know you can't touch the team. Hey, no discussing. Wouldn't call that shit a victory if everybody doesn't get to eat. Whatever it takes, what it's costing. I took a little second, but I'm back right up where I'm supposed to be. And I said, wait, cause I'm not bluffing. I look out for my people trying to make it, and I know they're looking out for me. Yeah, Graham on the beat. I'm Kamal Meets World. This song is Funk, off the first EP, Frozen, Friends and Foes. Thank you for listening.
More about funk and why this song?
I mean, I think the conception of it really is that, you know, because I started so much as part of a collective, and, you know, whether it was sort of freestyling, like I was saying earlier, or in the duo of Kamal and the Wolf, and all of my earlier releases were always accompanied by other artists. This past year was an opportunity for me to release things under my own name, and this was the first instance of that. And I think the irony of that was that when I really started working for myself and really investing into my own craft, that's when I started to be the sort of the best surrounded, you know, because I was so invested in my own things that I think it sort of attracted people who had a similar passion, whether for the same thing or for complementary skills, you know? And so I realized that like I worked really hard to get to a point where I could sort of release my own things. But in the end, in order to release my own things, I needed to rely on, you know, my brother, some of my friends, you know, beat makers, producers, videographers, photographers. There was such a big team involved into bringing that together, that it was this sort of thing of like, okay, if I'm introducing myself to the world, well, let me also introduce sort of the people who have also contributed to shaping me, you know, and with whom I would like to continue to build. Yeah, so that's kind of in terms of concept, that's sort of what it was.
I mean, even in the music video as well, it's just good vibes, summer vibes with like
Yeah.
your homies. You know, there are no scantily clad girls. Not
Yeah,
that that's
I think
bad. It's
so.
no shade. But you know, when you see like a pool scene in a rap video, that's what you're expecting to pop up. And it was just like good friends hanging out and vibing
Yeah,
together.
I think so. No, I mean, I could have stylized it and gone in that direction, but I think that would have given it a totally different tone.
Yeah.
I think I really just wanted to say, like, you know, like, we're like first and foremost just having a barbecue and hanging out. And then we just happen to be shooting a music video on that same day, rather than making actions for the music video. You know, it's like, obviously there were stylized cuts and there were moments where we kind of choreographed for it to look neat on camera, but it was essentially just us hanging out and doing what we do. And I wanted to capture that because that's what the song was inspired about. You know, it was like paying ode to that moment and the people who helped create it.
Oh, so okay. So I thought it was just like a hangout that you like plan for the video, but that it looks natural, you know, like it's
Yeah.
like that's the.
I mean, I think we would like, you know, we do things like that kind of regardless.
Yeah.
You know, we just hang out on like a Sunday afternoon and just like talk, you know, have barbecue, have some drinks, just, you know, things that friends do in the summer and just hanging out, take it easy.
Yeah.
So I thought like, what more do I need? Especially because a lot of the people who I'm referring to in the song are actually sort of present in the video at the barbecue. So
It works
that's-
out. Yeah, and funk as well, the title of the song. Like I like the beat. It's a funk beat, but you know,
yeah.
what, was it like to go with the beat, or was it to go with like the vibe that you wanted?
I think it was kind of in terms of the aesthetic of the sound that I was trying to develop and the direction I was trying to go into, I at some point was consciously trying to make funkier sounding hip hop. You know? So I was like, I want to make songs that sound like this because I want to create this vibe, because then the kind of funk that I was listening to, you know, and also James Brown and all these kind of guys that I would listen to kind of like, you know, on loop for a few months back, really inspired me. And so I sort of wanted to, you know, kind of emulate that, but in my own way. And so when I started writing this song, I sort of offhandedly just referred to it as, you know, the funk song, you know, and then eventually we referred to it as like funk so much that it felt strange to call it by any other name, you know. So we just committed, doubled down.
Yeah, double down, no turning back. This is it.
Yeah, it is what it is.
It's always so fun, and especially like seeing where the inspiration is from, because I feel like a lot of people feel that hip hop has to sound a certain way, but it's really about like writing the beat, like, you know, with the lyrics. But there's so much that goes into the beat, and that impacts how the song is, the vibe, all of that. And it's such an important aspect of a hip hop or just a song in general. And nowadays, people complain that like, oh, all the songs sound the exact same from one artist to like, I don't want to name names. I'm not going to name drop.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to throw shade at anybody because I know that it's hard out here. But you know, it starts to sound repetitive and it starts to sound like the same sound. Is that something that you like consciously tell yourself, like, I don't want my next song to sound the same as the last, or it just naturally happens?
I mean, within my own artistry, for sure. I think, you know, I mean, I think if you sort of tap into sort of like the larger topics of human nature, you know, and like art, you know, love and all of these things, I mean, there's kind of like an endless depth to them. So it's not like you're going to write a song on a specific topic and then you'll have said everything you need to. So you can always return to things. And I think that artists always do that. You know, you see the same recurring themes come back in people's discographies because those are the things that preoccupied the individuals making the art throughout the course of their life. So obviously you look to challenge yourself, put yourself under new creative conditions, and make art that you haven't before. But when it comes to how you compare yourself to others, I think the objective is not to try and make yourself sound like anyone else, but nor is it to make yourself sound different. It's simply to make yourself feel original by just being true to what you like, you know? I mean, I think for me, for instance, I mean, I think it's, you know, it's fairly obvious from, I guess, the way I speak, even in the music that I make, like, you know, I haven't had the same come up as like 50 Cent or something. Like if I was trying to make gangster rap, it would just sound like a bad version of
Yeah, I'd
gangster.
call you out instantly. I'd be like, first of all,
Yeah,
I knew
mean,
how you
people
grew
would
up.
be like, what are you doing? This
Like, what
isn't-
are you trying to do?
this doesn't make any sense, you know? So I think I just have to say, yeah, okay, that's true. I can't do that. But what I can do is kind of tell my own story, because no matter what I do, no one has told my specific story yet. So as long as I stick to telling my story in the way I want to, I'll just be original. Like I don't have to make an effort to be original, because I promise you no one has done that, you know, and that's true of everyone.
Yeah.
So rather than making an effort to stand out, I think making an effort to be true to yourself leads you to stand out anyways.
And even like dealing with the imposter syndrome as well. It's like, you know that there's no other you that's doing what you're doing. So stand in that power.
Yeah, exactly. It's not always smooth sailing, you know, but I think find a way to entrench yourself in that. It's important.
Yeah, look at that. Gems Life, Unqualified Guide to a Good Life, right there.
Yeah, unqualified. Do not trust
Unqualified.
at home.
We're not professionals, but. So before we let you go, just want to give you an opportunity for to let folks know how they can keep up with you and what's coming up next. What's some exciting news that you can share?
Yeah, so in terms of following me, Kamau Meets World, as it's been presented here. So it's all one word, excuse me. Kamau is spelled Kamau, and then Meets World all together. Actually, if you're looking for me on Spotify or social media, there are no capital letters, but it's usually easier to read that way because it helps separate the three words from each other. But to actually find my profiles, you can find it as that. And then in terms of what's coming next, I mean, I spoke about this capsule from which I performed funk. I'm going to release a series of those because having spent some time, like I said, during the pandemic, writing a lot of music and developing my own style and sounds and gearing up to this very first release under my own name, well, rather than like writing a full length project under my own name where I'm kind of giving you everything I've got, I want to release a lot of different capsules. Each will have their own style and will be accompanied by different producers, and will sort of hopefully express a different side of me and my artistry. And I want to give people an opportunity to get to know sort of what I'm capable of, as well as myself, what I'm capable of, and just to share all that. So end of August, I'm releasing, within 2-3 weeks, I'm releasing the next installment of Friends and Foes, which has its own name that I haven't publicly disclaimed yet, so I won't share yet, but that's coming.
Okay. That's like our little exclusive. Okay.
Yeah. So that's coming, and then every month after that, there will be things coming. There are also lots of other projects which you can follow that I continue to do in collaboration with others, set more for the end of the year. But really, yeah, in my own terms, it's this next capsule, and then as many shows as I can get booked for, really. At the moment, obviously, I'm in Switzerland, but if somebody in Canada wants to fly me over for a show, I'll be there.
You'll be there fully vaxxed and ready to go.
Yeah, fully vaxxed. I'll turn up. I'll do a birthday party, weddings.
I can see you jumping out of a cake. I see that for you. I do.
Yeah, well, hopefully, 2022.
Yes, fingers crossed. Thank you so much for joining us on the Chat Up Show, Kamau, and we're looking forward to what you have next in store and what you've got going on in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure to come on and talk about these things I'm passionate about. So thank you.
Of course, great. And with that, that concludes the Chat Up Show for today. As you know, you can keep up with the GBKM network 24/7 by listening and watching live at www.gbkm.tv or www.gbkm.fm. You can also download our app. Actually, I'm going to switch that. Make sure you download our free app, right now available for iOS and Android devices, so you're notified every time we go live and you can take us on the go. And you can also follow us on Facebook and YouTube, where you can also also continue to watch live at GBCam Network, and Twitter and Instagram, where you can receive more GBCam updates. It's at GBCam Network. And you can follow me, your host, at TIS_Liz_O on Instagram and Twitter. And with that, I will chat with you the same time, same place next week. Take care.
But the good news is that everyone is a potential solution. Sensitize the masses to sanitize. Keep a social distance and quarantine. Stop!
The coronavirus is sweeping over mankind.
Everybody must be alert. It's a global pandemic we can never take for granted.
Omulwadde wa corona temubuzanyisa bange.
Kila mtu must be alert. It's a matter of life we can never take for granted. Discipline and personal hygiene, and make sure you regularly wash your hands. Keep a distance from everyone. Report anything like a symptom. Serious fever is a symptom. Dry cough is a symptom. Walk with symptom. Itchy eyes and flu is a symptom.
Abo bobulwadde bw'ekuuma obutabusiiga bejjemu batannalwala olaga omwoyo gw'eggwanga